And if we have technical difficulties along the way, we will just be gracious now, won't we? All right. Just to make sure, is everybody seeing my slides in the proper way? Can you give me a thumbs up if you are? Awesome. Well, that means we're ready to go. I hope you're excited because I'm very excited about this work and tonight. So a little bit about the lead team. I just introduced us, but there's our names there. We are in the Trinity Conference. The Trinity Conference is Eastern Texas. It's Louisiana, all of Louisiana, and all of Arkansas. So we have a pretty large geographic area that we serve within, and about 360 churches. I think the number is probably closer to 370 now, but this is the Trinity Conference. Now, I serve as the dean, but assistant deans are Stacy Sweet and Jason Huffman, and they both serve unique roles on the lead team. For instance, you'll hear Stacy jumping in as we go to offer a perspective for how smaller conferences, if you are a smaller conference that has less resources than what the Trinity Conference does, Stacy's going to help be that voice of, hey, this is a work that even small conferences can do. Jason, you'll hear from Jason later. Jason is my slides are in presenter mode. Oh, well, I am sorry about that. I'm not going to worry about that right now, just so we can keep going. I'm so sorry, Jacqueline. I'm not going to fidget with it though, so we can just keep going here. Um, Thank you for that though. So Jason is the one who leads our mentor program of the School of Ministry, and so you'll hear from Jason here shortly as well. Now, Ross is the registrar. The registrar role is very, very important. So Ross will chime in as we go. I think a good question to answer as we start is, what exactly does the School of Ministry do? I had this question come up over a chat in Facebook earlier today. The most obvious is it provides educational requirements for certified lay ministry. That is the most obvious. We think about how we had certified lay ministry training in our former tribe. And also at the end of the School of Ministry educational requirements, students are encouraged to complete the process for receiving their certificate in lay ministry. So that is the primary function of the School of Ministry, but it's not all that the School of Ministry does. The School of Ministry also provides training for supply pastors, initial training, not course of study, but initial training for supply pastors and temporary pastors. In fact, in the Trinity Conference, this was one of the main reasons that we started the School of Ministry. Was we had a need in our conference for quickly training new supply pastors who they had started seminary or they had started course of study, but they needed a quick on the ground tool belt for ministry. Tracy, supply pastors is the new term we're using for somebody who is a candidate for ministry who is also pastoring a church, which this means in the Global Methodist Church that a supply pastor may have 0 seminary hours while they start pastoring. That was the circumstance in the Trinity Conference when we first launched the School of Ministry, to give them a quick tool belt of pastoral ministry skills. A third thing that the School of Ministry does is provides a platform for the conference to offer workshops and trainings that are not just laity specific, but they're also able to offer training to clergy. For instance, we have coming up next Saturday, May 18th, a preaching workshop. And that preaching workshop, we're very excited about the lineup. Dr. Jessica LeGrone, who's a member of our conference, will be teaching on preaching during that workshop. These workshops are not just for laity, they're for addressing various training needs throughout the conference. In fact, future workshops we hope to offer in this format might focus on mission and evangelism. I've seen that the Midtex Conference has done a Leadership Institute. We might try to do a leadership training as well. Or we could even offer worship leader training down the road. The School of Ministry offers a platform to do that in a unified place. The last thing that the School of Ministry does is provides a space for people to explore a ministry calling. And so we've seen a lot of our students, whether they finish School of Ministry and remain laity or go on and start the ordination journey, we've seen them articulating, you'll see in the testimonies later in the slides, articulating how much clearer they feel the call of God is for that moment in their life. It provides a place for students to really begin exploring how God is calling them. And we have seen many students say, I really feel God nudging me on to start course of study or to start seminary. So this is a really good thing, creates a cultural call in the conference. Now, this training tonight is how to launch a School of Ministry in your conference. So we have 8 steps. Again, don't worry, the slides will be sent out later, but we have 8 steps that we're going to talk through on how your conference can launch a School of Ministry. The first is that the Board of Ministry is the one who initiates the School of Ministry lead team. The Board of Ministry is the one who initiates this work of the School of Ministry. And this is important because certified lay ministry, the credentialing for that, according to the Transitional Book of Doctrine and Discipline, is a Board of Ministry function. So already the completion of the School of Ministry work needs to be in tandem with the Board of Ministry. In our conference, the School of Ministry lead team operates as a sub-team of the Board of Ministry. So I serve on our Board of Ministry and Ross serves on our Board of Ministry, and we each have different functions on the Board of Ministry that you'll hear here shortly. But that structure of us being a sub-team of the Board of Ministry has allowed us to address credentialing needs quickly, but also stay on the same page as the Board of Ministry as they approve our work and oversee our work. Our budget also comes from the Board of Ministry budget in the conference. We do need a budget, partly because some of the places that we make reservations for, they require down payments or they require a cleaning fee. We also need to have a place to handle registrations and reimbursements for different meals we offer to students. The Board of Ministry is the clearinghouse for our budget. So working with the Board of Ministry on that matter is also important. Now, we recommend that there is a separate function of educational requirements for certified lay ministry and credentialing in the Board of Ministry sub-teams. And what do I mean by that? Well, the work of the School of Ministry primarily focuses on a training educational piece. Ross's work on the Board of Ministry is with credentialing of those who want to go on as certified lay ministers. That is a very large work, and making those part of the same person or even the same team would overwhelm either. So we recommend that the educational pieces of the School of Ministry be in a separate sub-team from the credentialing pieces of certified lay ministry, even though they will work very closely together. We also recommend, now Ross is the registrar for our School of Ministry, but he also is the leader of the certified lay ministry credentialing team of the board. We recommend that pattern, especially if that person is very organized and able to do the work of a registrar. That has allowed Ross to be able to track our students all the way through their educational requirements for certified lay ministry, and then follow them into the credentialing requirements. Ross has acted as the go-between for those two. So step one is to work with your board of ministry before launching. Now, step two is once you have a school of ministry lead team in place, that team needs to assess which type of classes it's going to offer. We now have a guidebook for certified lay ministry training in the denomination, a Global Methodist guidebook for certified lay ministry training. If you have not seen that guidebook, we can easily send it out to you. That guidebook offers a very basic platform for different classes that would be helpful in a certified lay ministry training. But now each conference is going to have to set up their own program that follows those guidelines. And this is determined by context. What are our needs? What does our context need? You heard me say earlier that our School of Ministry primarily launched because we had a large need for quickly training supply pastors. Well, that means if you look at our current scope and sequence within our School of Ministry, that our classes largely focus on the basics of pastoral ministry. Now, we've noticed a need to offer more classes that are better fit for lay ministry, but that was what our context needed. The second piece when determining what classes would be your capacity. When we looked at the classes that we would like our new pastors that are stepping into supply pastorates for the first time to have, that would also fit with certified lay ministry, we also had to see what is our capacity. I mean, do we have the instructors that can provide the instruction in these classes? Can we meet the capacity? And so we determined what our required classes would be. For the Transitional Book of Doctrine and Discipline provides a statement on certified lay ministry that gives the absolute basics of what is required for a certified lay ministry completion. Now, for your conference, you may say that's all we can offer to launch. Those are going to be our basic required classes. Let's say it's 6, let's say it's 7, whatever our required classes is, that's all we have the capacity to do. For us, we launched with 11 classes, and we require our students to complete 10 of those classes for a certificate in lay ministry. Within our 10 required classes are the guidelines for CLM training and the guidelines provided in the Transitional Book of Doctrine and Discipline. So part of fleshing out what a School of Ministry looks like in your conference is determining your required classes. Now, if for your conference that's 6 classes, if it's 8 classes, if it's 10 classes, before you launch a School of Ministry, we highly recommend that you're able to offer all of those classes, which means that if your required classes, you require 5 classes. If you feel like you can only launch 3 classes, it's not yet time to launch. Students should be able to complete all of their required classes when you launch. So you can set that required number lower to make it easier, but it has to follow the Transitional Book of Doctrine and Discipline guidelines. The next thing to do, once you have your required classes in place and the classes you're going to launch with, is to outline your scope and sequence. So we say, what is the scope and sequence? Well, this is very, very important to the work of building out a School of Ministry. A scope outlines the topics that are going to be covered within the course, and the sequence is how the order that the topics are going to be taught. Now, for my visionaries on the call, I know you're thinking, wow, that's way too detailed for me. The detailed people are saying, that's great, we need that. This is a vital work. Let me show you an example of what this looks like. This is our scope and sequence for our class, Global Methodist History, Tradition, and Polity. In here, you can see we have 3 main knowledge points. And within each knowledge points, we want students to develop certain skills of understanding. Now, this is wonderful for instructors. When they say, "What do you want me to teach?" I can hand them this and say, "Can you create a course that fits this guidelines?" I have not had one instructor worry about what they're going to teach after being handed the scope and sequence. They're able to easily fill it in if the scope and sequence is well articulated. So vital work, as instructors are able to know what to teach. Now, this is also helpful for students. Students can say, "Hey, what exactly is in that class?" And I can copy, paste in an email. Here is what is in that class. This is what we're going to cover. Now, our School of Ministry lead team is meeting next Friday, and part of our work is going to be reviewing our scope and sequence and seeing where our classes need improvement, which knowledge areas need adjustments. And we're only able to do that work because we have outlined a scope and sequence. This is very important to setting up a good framework for a school of ministry. Now, once you have your scope and sequence, once you know what classes you want to start with, once you have the approval of the board of ministry, the blessing of them to go forward, we're ready to determine how we're going to offer classes. What is our class style? So are we going to offer classes in person, online? Are we going to do intensive week, intensive 2 weeks? Are we going to do weekends, Saturdays, weekdays? Again, this is answered by capacity and context. So let me start with an example of context. You heard me talk about the geographic area of our conference. It's very, very widespread. If you go from one point to the other, it's about 12.5-hour drive just to go from one point to the other. We had to offer something online. We knew that. But we also had, again, the initial context need for us was quickly training a large group of new supply pastors. So we decided we needed an intensive week where students could get all of the quick tool belt for ministry in that 1 week. And that's what we launched with, was an intensive week. Now, we also have a value for relationship, not just among our lead team, but also in our conference. We have a high value for being relational between Arkansas, Louisiana, and East Texas. And so there was a desire to also have weekend sessions. We do Saturdays where we travel across the conference and try to hit key geographic areas that each of our students can be at. Now, we have found that very helpful along the way. Students may see that one is coming close to them and they become new students at that point. That's been a helpful model for us. So you can see for us, when we recruit instructors, we're asking them to commit to 3 different instruction times. 1 time at the intensive week, 1 online session, and 1 Saturday in-person session. This fits our capacity. We felt like that we could ask our instructors to do those 3. It's also good to ask, how will teaching hours work? Now, the guidelines, the CLM guidelines in our denomination provide an overview for this. The Transitional Book of Doctrine and Discipline provides an overview for this. Actually, one of the works of our lead team, now that we have better articulations of this in the denomination, is to assess how our teaching hours work and make sure that we're aligning ourselves with the denomination as we keep going forward. But we need to decide how the teaching hours work. Currently for us, we do 3-hour lectures and we assign 1 book that's going to at least take 2 to 3 hours to read. That brings our total time to 5 to 6 hours. I think right now we are still a bit under, and we need to offer an additional piece for meeting our hours. However, I will say the 3-hour lectures has worked well for us. And there was an initial worry among our instructors that it wouldn't be enough time to cover the topic, but we have yet to see that to be the case. They're all able to fit within that 3 hours. It's also worked very good for our Zoom students, by the way, because 3 hours on Zoom is a lot. Okay, now we've got our class style. We know what classes we're offering. We know how we're going to offer them. Before launch, we need to set a firm date for the first few class offerings before we ever recruit instructors. Now, that's just wisdom, because the instructors, that if they're experts in their field, they're probably doing many other things. And so it's very important to say, here is the day and the time that I'd like to schedule. Are you available that day and time? This is good to go ahead and set the date of when we're going to launch. For us, we decided let's launch our first intensive week and then plan our Saturdays at the turn of the year. So our first intensive week was the first week in October of 2023. It worked well for us. In fact, we're going back to the first week of October this year as well. So we would encourage you to set that date. Okay, we are moving right along with our steps here. Now we're finally ready to recruit, but we recruit only after other steps are done. Only after we have all the other structure in place do we ever make a phone call to an instructor or a mentor. And now the mentor piece, Jason will cover later, but we've covered those steps. We're ready to call potential instructors. How do we recruit? Well, this is obvious, but it's worth saying. We want to recruit for both diversity and skill. Another aspect of the Trinity Conference is we're very diverse. Not only do we have the Houston Metroplex within our conference, which is one of the most diverse regions in the country, but also we have 3 states represented. So it's very important for us to be mindful of our instructors accurately representing the diversity of our conference. Again, our School of Ministry lead team has work to do when we meet next Friday to assess our current instructor pool and determine if we are meeting that diversity. For instance, right now, our instructors are Texas heavy, and yet we have very knowledgeable people in Arkansas and Louisiana that need to be pulled onto our instructor pool. So we also recruit instructors for skill. We don't just recruit a really good friend who's been in ministry for a while. We want to recruit people who are skillful in their area. Our recommendation is that we recruit experts. Now, this is usually, but not always, this is usually clergy. Somebody asked me in a previous Zoom like this, why our instructor pool is primarily clergy. Now, remember, our context, we launched the School of Ministry to provide quick training to supply pastors. So most of our topics are pastoral topics. We want a pastor to be teaching pastoral care, for instance. We want a preacher to teach preaching. We happen to have resident theologians to teach theology, and we have Chap Temple to teach Global Methodist history, theology, and polity. So these are our experts to recruit from, but sometimes laity are the experts, and that needs to be recognized. For instance, we might have a clergy person teach small group facilitator training, but there are probably some laity who could do that even better. Down the road, we want to offer classes like worship leader training, if that's possible for us in our capacity. Well, not all worship leaders are clergy. And so I think it's good to think we want to recruit experts, and we want our pool of instructors to match the diversity of our conference. When we call instructors to recruit, we have only done that after we have all the other details in place. So that means when I call an instructor, I can say, hey, we recognize you're an expert in this topic. We love for you to teach this class. This class involves this time commitment. This class involves these subjects. This is our scope. Would you be able to do this class? And we can quickly see the benefit of having already done the groundwork beforehand, before calling our instructors. Okay, now we're ready for the next step. Student tracking. We need to organize how we're going to track students before we ever get our first student. We need to know how we're going to track the students through the program. For instance, one student may jump in January for us, another may start in June, still another may start in September. Well, if one student has completed 3 classes, another 6, another 5, how do we know who is at what part of the program? Student tracking is vital. Now, this is where the registrar's main work comes in. Their main job, their main work is tracking students. Highly, highly recommend that this is not the same person as the dean. So a School of Ministry lead team only needs 2 main positions, the dean and the registrar. We recommend having additional assistant deans. Stacy and Ross have offered invaluable things to the School of Ministry, and it is a large work to lift. But maybe your conference is starting smaller than how we started. Having a registrar and a dean are the primary 2 functions. Jason's word in the chat is very good. We don't require students to follow a certain order of classes. There's no prerequisites. Any class can be taken at any time, which is good to say here because that means students can jump into the program at any time, or they may just take one class and then jump out. We don't require students to say they're going to be a certified lay minister in order to take a class. Why? Well, I've got small group leaders at my church who are going to benefit from the small group facilitator training, but they have no desire or call to take any of the other classes. We don't restrict students to only those saying they want to do the certified lay ministry track. Anybody can jump in and jump out of the program as God's called them. So prior to ever marketing to students, we want to determine our tracking system for students. We use a software program that Ross has set up. Now, we don't have the time to walk through all the details of that tracking system that we use. So at the very end, I'll give you the email address for the School of Ministry in the Trinity Conference. And if that additional training for how we do the registrar work is something you're interested in, I'd encourage you to email us and address Ross that you'd like to have that training. For some conferences, your conference may be so simple in its structure, maybe the technology, software, maybe that's too much. This can be done. This can be done with pen and paper. It just would be a lot harder than using software. And the system that Ross has developed is not something that's cost prohibitive. In fact, it's a Microsoft program. It's something many of us already have, we've just never worked with. So he's intentionally created a way that the tracking system can be something you can use also with just a little bit of training. So we also want, as part of our student tracking, we want to set up how the registration process and the cost of each class is gonna be before we ever market to students. For us, we ask students to contribute $15 per course. Now, what does that cover? Well, for our in-person students, we offer, for the Saturdays, we offer online and in-person at the same time. For our in-person students, that covers their lunch, and it also helps cover a small stipend for instructors. Every single Saturday session that we've offered, we've broken even. We've come right at even. So we found that $15 is a reasonable and not too cost prohibitive for students. It's very reasonable. That means our intensive week We offer all 10 classes, so you can do the math. We ask students to at least contribute $150 for that class set of 10 classes to help cover some of the cost of the intensive week. Part of our budget goes to subsidizing the work of the intensive week so that the intensive week is not cost prohibitive to students. But we do still ask students to contribute at least $150 to that intensive week, $15 per a class. But determining this beforehand with the lead team is an important work before we ever market to students. Now, part of that also is working with your board of ministry, working with your conference, whatever is appropriate for your setting, for the procedures of processing funds. In our conference, we cannot accept money at the door. We cannot tell students pay at the door. That's part of our finance team's rules, which means we had to process our registrations in a way that students could pay online before they arrived, and we had to have a cutoff day for registration. This has actually worked well for us. We found, after a lot of work, we found with our conference a way to do online payments in our registration, and that has smoothed over tremendously. Working with the conference, what is the rules of processing funds? How do we work with this? How do we access our budget? These are questions we want to answer before we have students ready to take classes. Now, finally, we are ready to market to our students. We're ready to get our first student in there. Of course, if your conference has a communication team or a communication officer, because this is ideally a work of the conference, we want to be in line with that conference communication team. So you might notice that a lot of the graphics that this slide set, the flyer that I made, they follow a certain brand protocol. It's got the certain colors, it's got a certain look to it, it's got a specific logo. This is work done with the conference communication team for us. Now, we also have an email list that we use with students. So every time a student signs up, our registration system gives us their email address, which we then add to an email list. That means every time there's a new class about to be offered, we send an email to every student announcing the new class, even former students. We have a lot of former students who will be at our preaching workshop for the advanced class offering. That email list steadily grows. So this is a great way that our presence within the conference has slowly spread larger and larger. We believe that over time, we'll be able to get a good voice to the people that need it the most within the conference, the people seeking the training the most. We also recently launched a social media Facebook group page. So if you want to go like our group, it's a School of Ministry, the Trinity Conference. It should be easy to find. Encourage you to jump on that just to see what we've got going on, what we're doing. It's brand new, so you won't see it very active right now. Now, a primary way that we have announced different class offerings coming up and whatnot are through flyers. We attach a flyer to our initial email we send out. We print flyers, put them in key places at conference gatherings. That's a great way to spread the word. We would recommend using Canva. Now, if you're not familiar with Canva, it's really user-friendly. It's very intuitive. It's a website. So you can Google Canva and find Canva. Highly, highly recommend it. Very, very beautiful flyers can be made through Canva. Well, with that, step 8 is launch. You're ready for launch, but before we get there, there's another important piece of our School of Ministry that we'd recommend you adopting, although it's not required, and that is our mentor program. So I'm going to let Jason, one of the assistant deans, share about the mentor program. He's the leader for this.
Yes, thank you, Tim. So Tim called me, golly, almost a year ago and shared his vision for this. And Mentoring has been an important part of our School of Ministry journey. Uh, it was easy to do it for the intensive week because we knew we've got this many students, they're all here, they're taking all the classes. So there's no question of who is in the program or who's out. As we've gone to the Saturday workshops, coming up next weekend, we have our third of our Saturday sessions. I'm just now kind of seeing continuity between who is in it for the long haul and who is just kind of our one-off piecemeals that are just taking a class here and there. So what does the mentor program look like? Well, the ideal mentor would be a veteran pastor, preferably a deacon or an elder. Maybe if they've got a lot of ministry experience, but they're coming in from another denomination, we might make an exception. But typically, they're a deacon or an elder who's got 5 full-time years of experience. They're going to be similar in age to their mentees. Ideally, they're going to be the same gender as their mentees, and also ideally, they're going to be geographically about a 1-hour drive or less from their mentees. And then, of course, we want the mentor to be passionate about helping others learn and grow in ministry. Well, you can see the more qualifications we put on that ideal candidate, it's hard to find somebody that meets that checks all those boxes. So some concessions are going to be made, but we do like to have a mentor that's fairly close by, hopefully same gender. One of the things that we do is we offer our mentors. We say, hey, there's kind of a handful of 2 or 3 other new pastors or lay ministers in your area. Would you mind meeting with them in a cohort? And they can just reach out to those, and they can set up that cohort, and they can meet together. Because when you meet together in a cohort, you're not only learning from the mentor, but you're also learning from your colleagues in ministry as they share about the successes and struggles of ministry and how things are going. And so we found that dynamic very helpful. But of course, one-on-one mentoring is also an option. A typical mentor meeting goes like this. When everybody gathers, there's a check-in. Check-in is, if you're familiar with a Wesleyan discipleship band, think of this as a discipleship band for ministry. How is it with your soul as it relates to the work of ministry? What are the struggles and successes you've had in ministry? How is preaching going? How is leading meetings going? Which of those are difficult? Which of those have been going well? Then some discussion of strengths and weaknesses. Typically, people that are new in ministry, we all want to play to our strengths, and we want to spend a lot of time doing the things that we're really good at. And it can be really easy to avoid those things that we're not so competent at yet, or that don't come to us naturally. And so one role of the mentor is to kind of help them identify some weak areas, and then encourage them to lean into those weak areas, because we can't do everything well, but we certainly can't avoid all the demands and duties of ministry. And so that's a big part of it, is of identifying strengths and weakness. Play to your strengths, yes, but also don't avoid those growing edges. Then the last component of that is a book study. We have a recommended reading list. I'm not going to go through all of it, but some of the titles that we suggest are Cost of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster, Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and then one of the texts for one of our workshops is Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership by Ruth Haley Barton. And so some of our students, they've sat in that workshop, they've already got that book and they're familiar with it, and then the mentor can do a deep dive with that. So the mentors, they meet with mentees about once a month for about 6 months. I mean, it's very it's a program that can be kind of tailored to the needs of the mentors and the mentees, and the mentors are not paid. So we want to honor their time and allow them some flexibility as they meet, but try to meet once a month for about 6 months. And it may be done separately, or it may be done in concert with the mentoring required by the Board of Ordained Ministry. We're kind of a little bit different. Our Board of Ordained Ministry here in the Trinity Conference is just now launching their mentor program. And some of our students are already in mentor programs with School of Ministry, and we're still kind of figuring out what the dance looks like between what we've already been doing and what they're going to be doing. But this is not about rights or territory or turf wars. It's really just about seeing that our new pastors and our lay ministers have some support and some guidance along the journey, because those of you who are pastors know that ministry can be exhausting, it can be discouraging, it can be frustrating, and we want these new pastors and lay ministers to have all the support that they need. And that's all I have, Tim. Thank you.
Jason, one of the things that excites me about our mentor program is the way we're able to engage with a broad set of clergy and experts, ministry experts across the conference, and equip them to equip the saints for the work of ministry. We have about 13 instructors, different instructors in the School of Ministry. But how do you remember how many mentors we currently have? I know we wrote it down somewhere.
We have over 30 that are actively mentoring, and then we have another probably 10 that they're willing and ready. We just haven't assigned students to them yet.
Yeah. So you can do that math and realize that within the School of Ministry, we have provided about 45 to 50 and growing amount of places for our clergy to jump into serving for the sake of the building of the kingdom, equipping the saints within our conference. So a little side work, if I was to add a 5 to the functions of the School of Ministry, is it equips even the called, even the clergy for the equipping work of ministry. It's very exciting. Let me run through some testimonials. We're almost done here, and then we'll entertain some questions. I love these two particularly. These were some recent testimonials we got. The School of Ministry reinforced my call from God and helped me see I was on the right track. I'm currently serving as a praise team member and as an adult youth leader at my church, while also filling the pulpit as needed at other churches. That testimony was from somebody who very much felt God calling them to stay in that role of laity and to do that role well. And you can hear their affirmation of that call from God. The second testimony is somebody who jumped into ministry. My time at the School of Ministry was the most enriching and meaningful experience I have had in any ministry setting. After the week at School of Ministry, my call to pastoral ministry was affirmed. So that's definitely a testimony worth sharing as well. Okay, right now, that email, school@trinitygmc.org. If you want the resources, the nuts and bolts, I got a question in the chat just now about the bones for our scope and sequence. We have put together a pre-made email ready to send whoever asks us for the slides, the resources, what we use as our guiding documents. We're ready to send that to you, but we need you to send us an email at school@trinitygmc.org. I would even say send it now. Go ahead and send that, and we'll start filling those and sending you those resources. There's about 7 documents. One of them is scope and sequence. One of them is the mentoring guidelines. One of them is this PowerPoint set. There's a couple example of flyers we made and used in there. Good resources for you to use at school@trinitygmc.org. Can you tell us how much your conference budgets for the School of Ministry? Our budget is, let me stop sharing and then we'll field some of those. Our budget is $10,000. Now that might be high for a lot of conferences. We have a very large work to do within our conference. 10,000 does help us offset the subsidize some of the extra fees, and we actually find we're going to come in under that, but mostly because we come even at all of the Saturdays. So 10,000 is, if you're able to shoot for that, that's good. But really you could make it work with 5,000. Schedule for the intensive week. We don't have that in the pre-made set, but I'll go ahead and tell you, if you ask that in your email to us, we will try to get that to you. Although, Andy, we do our pre-made email is just so we can field all of the requests coming to us. If we miss it in yours, just send us another email. Hey, can you send that? Any other questions? Man, 10 minutes to spare and no questions. How about it? Some significant challenges. I'm curious why your supply pastors don't go right. Let me answer Lisa's first, and then I'll go to John's. Lisa, they do. In fact, it wasn't an issue on whether they were in course of study or not, our supply pastors. It was more an issue that they were starting course of study and also starting pastoring. So classes at seminary level, even course of study level, can only move so quick. I might be able to take 2 classes in one semester, and maybe that's history, theology, and polity, and maybe I'm taking New Testament. Well, I've got to know how to visit somebody in the hospital right then. I'm a new pastor. I've got to know how to do the nuts and bolts of ministry quick. That was our problem in our conference. We needed a way to quickly tool belt those new pastors. In the UMC, you may remember this as local pastor licensing school. A local pastor went to licensing school and then they started course of study. In the GMC, this particular function of the School of Ministry allows us to quickly train our pastors as they start, our supply pastors, as they start in their course of study. John, I think significant challenges were mostly this is a common used phrase, but we were kind of building the bridge as we were launching it. The need arose, the vision was there. We had from July to October to set this all in place and do it quick. And by the grace of God, it happened. So my hope is that you've got a way better bridge already built, with especially after this training. You don't have to go through that heartache of building it while you're traveling. But that would be definitely the hardest piece. Can you please tell me how you had your courses approved by the Commission on Higher Education and Ministry? It's required by the TBDD. Okay, we don't currently have a Commission on Higher Education and Ministry that's firmly established by the General Conference, so that's yet to be determined. Ours was actually approved by the TLC. So we sent our work to the TLC early and said, what do you think about this? And they said, that's good. And then the work of the certified lay ministry team began to flesh stuff out. So that was just because it was a very early work and we wanted to make sure we were conforming. I'm sure going forward, the guidelines are going to be more clear, especially after General Conference. We'll know better. But Kim, that's how we did it. Yeah, there you go. Lisa's got it. Trinity at school at trinitygmc.org is the shared email. Now, when you email that, that's better than emailing me individually. That's better than emailing Jason or Stacy or Ross individually, because that email goes to all 4 of us and all 4 of us can respond. That way we don't have to get bogged down with emails, any one of us. Does each conference determine the number of classes? Cheryl, that's a great question. The TBDD requires certain classes, and at the completion of those classes, according to the TBDD, a certified lay minister has completed the education requirements. However, every conference has the freedom to set up how they're going to train certified lay ministers in that with those classes as it fits their context. For us, we have more classes we require than just what's in the TBDD. So for your conference, you might say, we just want to go with what's in the TBDD. Well, that's going to be less classes. And we want to recognize that when the Board of Ministry certifies somebody for any type of ministry, we want to be able to say, we have provided this training. So that's a good question to ask in your context. For us, it's 10, but for the TBDD, it's less. I don't know offhand. I think it's 6, but it is less. Yes, in our conference, Lisa, we require, before we will certify somebody as a lay minister, we require them to have completed 10 or the equivalent. Now, in the Global Methodist Church, we don't have as firm of boundary lines between conferences as we did. Some of our students are from other conferences. In fact, I saw John is on this call. John went through our program, and John's in Florida. And that's fine in the GMC. The only caveat is students that are from other conferences, their board of ministry has to recognize that as a valid program. So we tell students from other conferences, we can give you this training. If you were in our conference, we could certify you, but your board of ministry is going to have to agree to this. So we give all of our students a transcript of their classes that they've completed. That's part of the software program that Ross has developed, is every student can have a transcript. So any other questions?
Tim, I think I have one. Forgive me for doing this in front of all these nice people, but this PowerPoint, I don't think was attached in the email. Was it?
I've got it in my set. Jason, if I forgot to send that to you, that is my bad.
It's okay. I've been replying to everybody in the draft, but if we can get them to reply back to us and we can get this
what
PowerPoint.
I gave you was a PDF of the PowerPoint.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah. If you need an edited version, a version you can edit, okay, well, you can ask for that. But I figured PDF was a better file format for most people for this. Yeah, John, I'm going to try to upload this onto YouTube so it's easy to watch, and then post it in all the same places that you saw this particular posting. Need to clip it. We're talking right now, right? That needs to be clipped out. But once all that's done, you'll probably see it all over those same places you saw the announcement for this. Yep. We have a Facebook page. We don't have a YouTube page, but I do. So I'll upload it to my YouTube account and we'll share it from there. So. All right.
Tim,
Yes,
Tim,
ma'am.
the subcommittee on lay ministry thanks you for your time and all of the work that you four put into doing this for us. We really appreciate what you've done tonight, and I think it will be very helpful to at some point, I think I saw the highest was 48 participants. So we thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I was praying through this, thinking through this very, very early on in the vision for the School of Ministry and the Trinity Conference. I remember Ross and I having a conversation where I said early on, I just really feel like God's pushing us to put this in a way that it can be shared. I really feel like it's going to be quick, that we need to be able to share it. So I think to be able to see that early piece of the vision fleshed out is absolutely a joy tonight. So I definitely want everybody on the call who wants the resources to get them. So please do email school@trinitygmc.org. Yes, School of Ministry Training. Yes, it's the PowerPoint is in PDF. Yep. Yes, Lisa, our Zoom classes are 3 hours. It's one time for each class, 3 hours. And we're mindful that we're offering a very basic training. We're not doing what Course of Study does. So what we're able to cover in 3 hours is enough for certified lay ministry, we feel. Now we might expand that. Like I said earlier, we have some work to do in assessing the scope and sequence, but for now, that is the format we've been using. Hey, Ross, what's the name of that Microsoft program you use? Access. Yeah. So super simple. Microsoft Access. Probably you've got it on your computer right now. You just don't normally use it.
And I'll share the program and help anyone that's setting up a registrar. And it does help if you had one of your people on the school ministry, as well as one of the people on the CLM team, be the person that handles that. Just happens to be me on this case. But,
Well, friends, we're at 7 o'clock. I just encourage you, if you got any further questions, just reach out to the shared email and we will be glad to respond. All right. Well, y'all have a good evening. Blessings to each of y'all.